This is a quick overview of some of the functions within support at support.spirent.com. So we have a couple different menus transpiring on this screen. So on the left side, we have what could be commonly called applications. So home, as it implies, takes you back to the main page. Knowledge base, so this can be our FAQs, documents, things like that. Forums, it's going to be a forum where you can ask questions. There's other users. There's not a whole lot of usage there. I would highly emphasize reaching out to your SE or sales engineer to answer technical questions. Downloads. Downloads are going to be where we can go to get firmware, software, applications, and documentation, which for the sake of this video is one of the things I'll go over. In the future, if you ever need to open support cases, there are cases there. Applications, that's something that we get internally. And then training. If you've got the permissions and you are currently logged in, if you click on training, then you can watch some short tutorials on how to do different things within the different products that we have. Coming back up to the top and to kind of the right of center, we have license activation. And so when you get a new product or you renew your licenses, this is a location you can go to create a text file that is uploaded to your device, your appliance, whatever the example may be. You'll get an entitlement ID. That entitlement ID, when you plug that in and you log in, that entitlement ID is the login. This is telling you all the different products that are supported with this application. So CyberFlood and Test Center are two that I'll highlight. C1, C50s, and virtuals, those are all subsets of Test Center. But you're going to put an entitlement ID here, hit login, and then it's going to ask you for a mechanism for delivery. You can either have the license file, which again is just a text file, emailed to you, or you can download it straight from this interface. So changing gears, we're going to jump over to the downloads section. Download section is going to start its navigation from the top left. So we are compliant with all US government export rules and regulations, which include us having this little splash here. So you accept that you will not export this to places that it's not supposed to be exported to. So do not send these files outside of the US without prior consultation of Spirent. So the menu here is a tiny bit counterintuitive. You want to start top left and work your way down. If you start down and work your way up, you're undoing everything. This will make sense here in a short while. So releases for software, documentation, etc., or general release, which is generally speaking, pun intended, whatever current release we're on right now. If you do the drop down, you can go to controlled. So there's going to be export controlled software licenses, and archived is going to be N-1 in most cases. So if something is on, let's just say 5.33 right now, anything 5.32 and older, you'll change this to archive. And when you do that, you'll get a menu over here that'll pop up in just a moment that would say, well, what release do you want the archive of? But before that comes up, we'll have to choose the version. So let's go ahead and swing this back over to general release. And let's pick our product line. So the two generally, if I've referred you to this file, or to, I'm sorry, to this video, the two generally that I deal with are CyberFlood. So there's CyberFlood, and then there's Test Center. So we'll just go ahead for now, click Test Center. And if you've kind of been following along, this part down here is updating as we change things up here. So general release, Test Center, now what it is that we want to download. So updates for the appliances, that's not very common. Applications, that's very common. So when you have a maintenance PC and you want to install the software that will configure Test Center, start and stop, look at your test results, etc., those are going to all fall under applications. If you want to understand how to manipulate the application and interpret results, documentation. So when you install the application of Test Center on your maintenance PC, it's going to automatically also install documentation. But let's say you want to read ahead, or you want to have multiple machines, not necessarily just the maintenance machine that has that documentation for reference purposes, planning, what have you. Then this allows you to just install the documentation. Firmware, as the name implies, you would update the current release of the system that's running on test center. Just keep in mind, if you update the firmware, you need to also update the application. The application needs to go first. So let's say I'm on 5.3.3 and I'm upgrading to 5.3.5. I would download 5.3.5 application first, install that on my maintenance PC, then come back, download 5.3.5 firmware, and then upload that to my Spirent Test Center chassis or appliance. Tools are, just as the name implies, tools for implementing some of these configurations and your applications. Virtual, so STC is also available on ESXi or other virtual hosts as applicable. So you would just click on that, and that's going to have your OVA file or whatever it is that you need to install. So for the purpose of this, we're just going to do documentation real quick. So we can see we've got documentation here we can put on Windows, Linux, or Unix, which is basically the same thing. So if I wanted to install this on my machine, I would just click on the down arrow, and as long as my pop-up blocker didn't stop it, then this would go through. And just keep in mind that there's some additional information here. Description is usually pretty helpful, especially when you start doing applications and firmware. And then related resources will have release notes. So if you want to know what's the difference between 5.3.5 and 5.3.3, go into the 5.3.5 release notes and you'll see things there. Product alerts. If you're trying to stay ahead of the game, you want to see what's going to be obsolete or planned obsolescence, end of life statements. I don't know why I'm at a loss for words right now. You're going to find things like that there. So click on this, double click it. It's going to have a zip file. And then whenever it's completed, whenever you click on the Windows icon, lower left corner, or whatever is applicable for your Unix or Linux, your documentation comes up. And then from there, you can do keyword searches. So let's say you want to do RFC 2544. Just go into key terms 2544, and it's literally going to talk you step by step through the process of installation. So we went through a general release. Let's just real quick go through an archive release. So let's say we're not on the current version. I want to get that documentation. So if you notice, when I changed the archive, everything else got blown out. So we're going to come back. We're going to do test center. Give it a few moments. We're talking about documentation. Now, if you've noticed, I still haven't hit the release yet, because if I change anything over here, it blows out my release. And there's no point in putting Windows. Their documentation is normally going to go on Windows. So now I'm going to swing over here and let's go to, and it's reverse numerical order. So we are on 5.3.3. I'm sorry, 5.3.5. If I want to download 5.3.3, come down here. And this is the documentation that's installed whenever I install the application on a maintenance PC. But of course, it's just the documentation part of it. So I could download this, burn it to a DVD, thumbstick, whatever your IT allows as far as data, removable data, and just install it, again, clicking on the down arrow. If you're open to suggestions, I like using Google Chrome because it's easier to manage downloads. And I have less of a problem with pop-up blockers. So if you click on this and absolutely nothing is happening, look for a pop-up blocker, because something like that probably got you. So with that, any questions, feel free to shoot me a message, John, JOHN.schubert, SCHUBERT, at Spirent, that's SPIRENT.com, or shoot me a phone call, 760-846-8830. Thanks for your time and have a great day.